Hi guys, it's me, HD, and welcome this morning, if you are in Europe or in the UK like me, to the Practice 3 watch-along for the 2021 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Hopefully you guys are doing well ahead of the final qualifying day of the season and of this particular era, of course, of Formula 1. Yeah, and hopefully, even if you're, not in the European area, if it's very late at night, early in the morning, middle of the day, whatever you want to call it in terms of time, location, wherever you are in the world, hopefully you're having the best day possible you could be having given whatever circumstances you are going through. But of course, we are here today for Practice 3, the final, of course, practice session of the season. And of course, it is a very important session because we will get to see, even though the weather conditions and track conditions and the track temperature won't be representative, say, or as representative as Practice 2, we'll get to see, I think, quite a bit more of the pace of the cars over a single lap and, the representative pace, hopefully, of the cars over a single lap. And hopefully, when it comes to the two championship protagonists, hopefully it will be a close fought thing in this session to set us up going into qualifying. But yeah, hopefully you guys are doing well, and hopefully you'll join me today in watching along this session, and of course watching along qualifying with me later on. Just a reminder, my qualifying watch along will start at 12:30 p.m. UK time. That's half an hour before qualifying starts, and qualifying starts at 1 p.m. UK time. So would be great if you could join me later for that as well. Of course, a very, very important session in qualifying around this circuit. Despite the track changes, qualifying is still very important at the Yas Marina circuit. But we'll see if there is, any extra, any extra overtaking in the race on Sunday. But like I said, the weather conditions for Practice 3 and the track conditions, track temperature, won't be as representative as it was, for example, in Practice 2 yesterday. And talking of Practice 2, let's now get into... sorry, my throat cutting out a lot. I've only just woke up about 45 minutes ago, so do bear with me in this practice session. But let's get into the results of Practice 2. So Lewis Hamilton ended up in P1, quite a bit clear of the rest of the field, 3.5 tenths of a second to the next car being Esteban Ocon, surprisingly, in the Alpine. And then Mercedes, Valtteri Bottas in third place, just behind Esteban Ocon. Max Verstappen P4, 6.5 tenths behind Lewis Hamilton. Red Bull and Verstappen came out yesterday and said that they believe they are definitely slower at the moment compared to Mercedes around this circuit over a single lap. I still think that it's too early to absolutely say that, because we've seen plenty of times this season Red Bull on a Friday be slow and then on a Saturday be much quicker. So I wouldn't be surprised if Max Verstappen was much quicker and at least much closer to Lewis Hamilton if Hamilton is still lapping very well around this circuit in this session and in qualifying later as well. So I don't think the gap will be 6.5, 7 tenths of a second in qualifying later, for example. I don't think Mercedes have that type of advantage around this circuit. And then, Perez P5, 7 tenths of a second behind Lewis Hamilton. Then you got Fernando Alonso in P6. So Alpine look as though they're the third quickest team this weekend so far. But again, there's still plenty to happen in this weekend. And then you got Yuki Tsunoda P7. And then Leclerc 8th, Sainz 9th, and Gasly 10th. So AlphaTauri and Ferrari also looking pretty good. And then Ricciardo P11, Giovinazzi P12, Norris P13. And then Vettel 14th, Stroll 15th, Raikkonen 16th, and then Russell, Latifi, Mick Schumacher, and Nikita Mazepin rounding out the rest of the field. But, I mean, by the look of it so far, Mercedes look as though they are quicker, but like I said, Red Bull normally on a Saturday push a lot harder than they do on a Friday. I think they, you could say that they put more sandbags on than Mercedes do on a Friday. So I think Red Bull will definitely be quite a bit quicker in this session. Normally in qualifying, Max Verstappen and the Red Bull team are quite strong. So I think you'll see again a much stronger performance from Max Verstappen today than we saw yesterday from him. And then after Mercedes and Red Bull, looks as though Alpine are the third quickest team. And then after that, you'd probably say AlphaTauri and Ferrari kind of tied for fourth and fifth quickest teams, and then McLaren sixth after that. But like I said with Red Bull, McLaren also do tend to not really show their real hand anywhere near as much as other teams on a Friday. So I think McLaren also could be a team that rise up the order quite a bit compared to what they did in yesterday's practice too. We have, 8 minutes to go until the third practice session begins. Just want to get into a couple things quickly. So, of course, the last time you guys heard from me was the race reaction stream, which was, just after the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, about 6 days ago. Of course, we got into, Verstappen and Hamilton and, what happened there. And after the stream finished, Max Verstappen was given a 10-second time penalty for the moment where he slowed down to let Lewis Hamilton through, and then Hamilton, slowed to not get ahead of him because he didn't want to give Verstappen the advantage of having a run on Lewis down to turn one with DRS, and then Max braked a bit more, then Hamilton went into the back of him. Honestly, I do disagree with that penalty because, like I said in the race reaction stream, Lewis Hamilton could have easily overtaken him. He could have easily overtaken him. There is absolutely no doubt to be had about that. Verstappen didn't break any rules through what he did. Neither did Hamilton, but Max Verstappen did not break any rules. All he did was slow down to let Hamilton through. Hamilton refused to go through, so then Verstappen braked a bit more to, let Hamilton go. But Hamilton then went into the back of him because Lewis was intent on not passing him. So, like I said, Max would not have the advantage on Lewis going down to turn one. So I still think really it's a 50-50, that incident, and that they're both as stupid as each other when it comes to that, and both as bad as each other when it comes to that particular incident. But the stewards, of course, giving out 10-second penalty to Max Verstappen. That's what it is. Of course, Max Verstappen has had a reaction to that, saying that he's penalised more so than other drivers, which I agree with only to a very small extent. I don't think it's as big as he says or he thinks. I honestly don't believe that he is penalised way more than anyone else. I think he gets involved in incidents a lot more than anyone else, because when he is racing someone, whether he's defending or overtaking, he is, he's always on the limit of what you're allowed to do. Most of the time he doesn't go over the limit, but he's always on the limit. So I think that's why a lot of the time he does get, in investigations and possible, penalties and stuff like that. Also, Red Bull and Christian Horner, of course, the team principal of the Red Bull racing team, has said that Mercedes are, let me just try and find the exact quote quickly of what he was saying about what Mercedes are doing in regards to Max Verstappen. It was something like, so this is it. So basically he was saying, and has said so far this weekend, that Mercedes are pushing a narrative and using a smear campaign to push Verstappen as this crazy guy who, it shouldn't be on the track and shouldn't be allowed to win the World Championship or anything like that. I agree to a certain extent that, that is their opinion, and that's the opinion they want to, air to the media. But I don't think it's, as big a conspiracy as maybe Horner would have. But yeah, the relationship between Mercedes and Red Bull definitely not in a good place. There is no doubt about that whatsoever. Also, Helmut Marko was pretty reactionary after the Grand Prix finished. There was one thing he said that was pretty dumb, that when Verstappen braked, and the point where Verstappen braked where Hamilton hit him, Helmut Marko said, well, Max braked at that point every lap, which, I mean, you could see from the incident, you didn't have to see any data, that was absolute bullshit, because Max was braking way earlier for the, final corner than you would. So that was absolute rubbish then. Thankfully, he did, apologise for that. But yeah, the relationship between the two teams, not exactly in a great place, but they are fighting for the World Championship, and you do have to remember that Mercedes are looking for, to make even more history in terms of the Constructors and Drivers' Championships, how many they've won in a row since 2014, and Red Bull, you have to remember, they've not won a championship and had not even raced for a championship in 8 years. So, this is the first chance they've got, and you never know, in 2022 and beyond, Red Bull might not be in a position quite next year if they've, not developed the car well enough for next year. They might not be in a position for a couple of years after this to be in, in a World Championship winning position. So, of course, that is why the tension is so high. That's why they're both at each other's throats, really, for this World Championship. But we have, 2 minutes to go until practice 3 gets underway. And if you want to comment in the chat, guys, anything in regards to what I've said, or what your thoughts are going into the session in regards to the championship fight and who you expect to be, the quicker driver, quicker team, then make sure to let me know in the live chat room. I will read some comments quickly. Hello to everyone in the chat, by the way. Dylan says, tired as fuck, up all night. I could have easily stayed up all night, but I know myself that I'd need to get some sort of sleep before this session. I am pretty tired to the point where one of my eyes is a bit closed at the minute because I'm that tired. Nathan says, mate, this qualifying is going to decide the race. I don't think it'll be quite that. If the track layout was the same as last year, then I agree. Then it would most likely settle who wins the Grand Prix. But when you look at a couple new corners, I think it does make things interesting, and I think it does make for a possibility, for example, between Hamilton and Verstappen, that even if Hamilton is lower on the grid or Verstappen is lower on the grid, there is a chance to make up that position on the first lap, because there are a couple corners where it's a bit easier, I think, probably to overtake. Right, I'll just quickly get the graphics ready, and then I'll read out more comments from the chat room. Let me just get this, and there you go, on the back of the rear wing from Alpine, L plan. I'd hope some people in the chat's Spanish should be good enough to know what L means. The running order on the left-hand side is obviously not the live running order. That's just the template. I'll update it as the session goes on. Let me just get things going. So there you go, FP3. And of course, every practice session, if you are new to Formula 1, every practice session is an hour long, as the green light, I think, has already gone at the end of the pit lane, so I'll sync up my time in about 20 seconds time for this session. But yeah, 59 minutes left in this session, and I think the first car out is an Aston Martin. As Verstappen coming out of the pits on the medium compound tyres. And there you go. Let me just adjust the position there. So there you go. 59 minutes to go. And like I said, I will update the order as the session goes on. Dylan says, Alpine have been really fast in the last few races. Chances of another Alpine podium for Lewis and Max collide. Yeah, absolutely. Nib saying, great to see you, by the way, mate. In the chat says, Red Bull's race pace, which they focused on, was very encouraging. Keeping it real says, you are the best English-speaking commentator operating an F1 chat. I'm really happy you're covering this important round. Thank you very much for that. I really do appreciate that. And yeah, of course, this is the final weekend. We're going to cover as much as we can. Like I said, this session, qualifying, we'll be doing a race preview tomorrow, 3 hours before the race starts. Of course, the race watch-along, and then a race reaction stream reacting to all the events of the Grand Prix. So plenty of content coming up this weekend. And also, don't forget, in regards to the race, don't forget to obviously come to the race watch-along, but also come to the race reaction, because it's an important stream that, not just, you know, to get all the reaction to the final Grand Prix and, of course, whatever big thing happens in the race, but I will be announcing my plans, my channel plans for the winter. And like I said in Saudi, the plans are, I think you guys will like them. It means there'll be, you know, some good content in terms of the amount of content on the channel through the winter. So yeah, don't forget to come along to that tomorrow, and I'll, you know, let you guys know what the plan is going forward. But Max Verstappen, by the way, has just started his first flying lap of practice 3, runs slightly wide on the exit of turn 1, now into turn 2 and 3, which is flat out. And now they miss out what would have been the turn 5-6 hairpin and go straight to what is now the turn 5 hairpin, and approach it pretty quickly. But in the race at the start, that will be definitely a corner that overtaking will be done at. As Verstappen now opens the DRS on the first DRS zone and brakes hard now for turn 6 and 7. And then opens the DRS yet again for the straight in between turn 7 and turn the new turn 9. And Max, yeah, clearly much quicker than the quickest man so far. And I'll start to update some of the order. Might as well update that Max Verstappen is quickest now, considering how quick he has been so far. And Esteban Ocon, by the way, is the quickest man at the moment. Max Verstappen, though, comes to the line and goes 1.6 seconds quicker straight away. And remember, in practice 2, yesterday, Max was actually slower than Ocon, so a good first banker in there for Max Verstappen, even though I'm sure Esteban Ocon can go much quicker. By the way, everyone else below Verstappen and Ocon has not set a time yet, so I'll update that as the session goes on. Dylan asks, what do you think about what the FIA have said about if the drivers collide this weekend? If you want to know, anyone, you know, listening, you want to know what Dylan means there. So the FIA basically in the race director notes put out a warning that anyone, you know, found to be egregious in what they do, and maybe, you know, if they take someone out in a uncaring, deliberate way, or a way that you could, you know, be suspicious that it was deliberate, then there will be points deductions on the cards. And the reason they're putting that is simple, because they don't want a Schumacher Damon Hill from 94, or a Schumacher Villeneuve from 97, or a Senna Prost from 1990. That's the last thing we want, is Max, for example, say at the turn 5 hairpin, diving down the inside and just ramming Hamilton and himself into the barriers. Because if he does that, of course, and there's no points deduction or disqualification, then Max will be world champion. Because if they both don't finish, Max will be champion, because he has... would have, if they both, retired from the race, Max would have the extra race win. That would mean he would be the champion. As just looking now, so you got Kimi Räikkönen up to second. Lance Stroll about to come to the line, and he does, and he goes P4, last of all the runners so far on the hard compound tyre. But yeah, Kimi Räikkönen up to second. Of course, it is Kimi Räikkönen's final Grand Prix of his career. It's a shame that his career has to end, but given what's happened in the last couple of years and the team he's found himself at, and he's not going to find himself at a different team because Formula One has moved on, and, the teams are looking for the new next best things rather than someone like Kimi. That means Kimi really has no choice but to retire. Of course, he won this Grand Prix back in 2012, finished on the podium here in 2015, and did he finish on the podium here any other time? No, I don't think so, but he's had an okay record around this circuit, but honestly, for Alfa Romeo, I'm not expecting really that much around this circuit. For them, Saudi Arabia was a bit of just a rare good performance, I guess you could call, from the Alfa Romeo team, and I just don't think you'll see, say, a performance as good as that in this particular Grand Prix from them. I'll just read this quickly from Nib earlier in the chat. Oscar Piastri is the GOAT. If you didn't know, guys, the F2 Championship has been decided. Oscar Piastri is your Formula 2 champion for 2021. I think the first Australian ever to win the F2 Championship, or GP2, or whatever it was, has been called at the time. And yeah, congratulations to him. Clearly the best driver. And probably the most dominant driver in that series since probably Russell, Leclerc. And it is a shame that he won't be on the grid next year, but we know the reason why. It is financial. The reason why. Guan Yu Zhou, don't get me wrong, is a good driver. Will he be good enough for Formula One? That's a different thing. I'm not sure if he will or not. We'll have to see next year. And of course, that does depend on how good the Alfa Romeo of 2022 is. And given the extra wind tunnel time that Alfa Romeo, have gotten over the last year because of the new cost cap regulations, you would expect Alfa Romeo would be a bit better next season, given that extra wind tunnel time compared to, say, the front of the midfield. But we've seen with Alfa Romeo the last couple of years, they've not exactly performed that well. But yeah, Guan Yu Zhou, definitely. I think the first and main reason that Guan Yu Zhou is on the grid is because of where he is from, and because he brings more of a financial package to the Alfa Romeo team than Oscar does. But Oscar definitely is the best driver in Formula 2, and I still think, as Max Verstappen, by the way, is about to come to the line and set another fastest lap, and he does. He goes a tenth and a half quicker than his previous best onto 124.8. He is still, of course, in P1, 10 minutes gone in this session. But in my view, and you guys can let me know in the chat, in my view, a rule should be made that if you win the F2 Championship, you should be guaranteed a place in Formula 1. That's my opinion. Because there has to be a clear reward and point to taking part in Formula 2. And if you win Formula 2 and then you don't get anything for the next season, then it doesn't really feel like a reward, obviously, and it doesn't also feel like there's much point, or there was much point in taking part in that series. For example, Oscar Piastri probably, in hindsight, would have been better this season, either sitting out or racing in something else, and then racing in F2 next year, because the grid, we all knew, because of, people, a lot of the teams want to be, having a settled driver lineup going into 2022 and the new regulations. We knew that the driver lineup for the field really next season was going to be basically the same, except for 2, maybe 3 teams. So, like I said, there has to be a point to racing in F2, and there has to be an incentive. And I think clearly the incentive, should be there. That if you win Formula 2, you are guaranteed a place in Formula 1. I think that should be made a rule. And yeah, you could say, well, you cannot dictate to teams, who they take in their car. But, you're then losing out on some pretty good talent who, end up successful in Formula 2. So I think you have to try and fix that, because it is a problem. And he's not the only one, Oscar, who's won F2 and then had to sit out a year and get his chance later on. Well, of course, we'll see if he gets his chance later on, but it's not right. And like I said, he's not the only one. Nick De Vries, of course, won in 2019. And he, I thought, was pretty good that season. Is Nick De Vries as good as Oscar Piastri? Probably not, but like I said, he still, I think, deserves, and I think anyone who wins F2 deserves their chance. And then you have, was it Jolyon Palmer? Won in 2014, then had to wait till 2016. Of course, Palmer did not succeed in Formula 1, but still, the case remains that I think you should get an automatic entry to Formula 1. Lucas says that rule would be dumb, and which team would take the champion makes no sense. But it does make sense, because you have to there has to be an incentive to taking part in Formula 1, Formula 2, and Formula 3. There has to be some sort of incentive. And we have to, as Lewis Hamilton, by the way, goes P1, but Hamilton did that time on the soft compound tyre. So, yeah, just keep that in mind. And obviously Max on the medium. Like I said, there has to be an incentive to racing in Formula 2. You can't just have drivers racing in Formula 2, doing well, and then nothing come of it, because then what's the point in racing in Formula 2? And yeah, maybe, what do you call it? Which team would take the champion? That's probably the area you'd have to focus on, and that's probably the hardest area of, if you were to make that particular regulation, that's the area you'd have to focus on. That's the hardest bit you'd have to focus on to get it right. But I still think there has to be a sort of rule, like I said, where an F2 driver that wins the championship is guaranteed a place. Maybe, I don't know, maybe create another team and then, allow for an automatic spot. I don't know. But something needs to change, because it's not right. It's absolutely not right. You cannot have drivers on the grid who clearly haven't been as good as other F2 drivers get a chance in Formula 1 because of financial packages. That's just not right. And we know it. Dylan says an idea that could be that you could have 2 teams on the grid reserved exclusively for young drivers. On the top 10 of the constructors' teams, similar to current junior teams. Yeah, I think that that's a possibility. I mean, Red Bull, of course, have their junior team with AlphaTauri. And then you've got Ferrari have their, technically speaking, junior team or junior teams with Haas and Alfa Romeo. But Ferrari don't have a proper singular junior team where it's, absolutely clear or as clear as what Red Bull have with AlphaTauri. Mercedes don't. I mean, Mercedes do kind of have one with Williams, but it's not. Again, it's not anywhere near as clear as Red Bull. And then, of course, Alpine don't have one. And that would be, technically, if Alpine were to have one, it'd be basically a Renault young driver team. Maybe, yeah, you could have a couple more teams on the back of the grid in young, or not young cars. What am I trying to say? In like what Red Bull has with AlphaTauri, a second team where the other drivers in either the driver academy system or, like I said, where the F2 champion, can get a place on the grid. It would be hard. I will admit it would be a hard rule to implement, but there has to be a way, I think, to implement it, because we can't continue this thing of, not allowing the grid to be made up of the 20 best drivers. And I think it's got a lot better than it was. So a few years ago, we had a few drivers on the grid who were purely on the grid, or not purely on the grid, but were mostly on the grid because of their financial backing. If you look at the grid now, and, if you just look to the left-hand side of the screen, most of the grid, I'd say probably 90% of the grid, is there mostly because of what they have talent-wise. And then probably the only drivers who are on the grid, say number one reason there being their financial package that they bring with them, is probably Latifi, Mazepin, and that's probably it, I think you would say. And like I said, it was a lot worse a few years ago, where you had Ericsson, who was a decent driver, but he did have some money with him that did, help him keep with the Sauber team. Felipe Nasr, even though Nasr was, I thought, a good driver in Formula One, and was a bit unlucky with how his time went, he also had a good financial backing that helped him. We had Rio Haryanto. Obviously, his financial backing fell apart, but I think that's why he got onto the grid. And of course, Sergei Sorokin. So it is getting better, which is good to see. But I still think Formula One should still be, the 20 best drivers possible, rather than having 2 or 3 per season drivers who are there simply, really, to offer a financial backing to whatever team they are racing for. Nib saying in chat, unfortunately not everyone is as committed to the future of the sport as Red Bull are. Look at the improvement from 2014. Yeah, that is a good point. And teams like, if we were to have a Renault young driver team, that would be under threat, definitely, from, eventually coming off the grid, because we know that Renault, for example, do tend to pull out of Formula One quite a bit. So, yeah. As Lewis Hamilton, by the way, as we now come back to the session, Lewis Hamilton is, of course, P1, and he's on another flying lap. 2 purple sectors, and he's about to go even quicker than he went previously. I'll update all of the order in just a moment, as Lewis Hamilton does go even quicker. So 1:24.0, and he is now 0.7 of a second clear of the next car, which is Max Verstappen. Again, though, Verstappen on the harder compound of tyre. As Sergio Perez is up to P3, you've got Bottas then in P4. Giovinazzi is up in 5th, which is pretty good so far. And then Fernando Alonso is in 6th. Kimi Raikkonen is 7th. As Latifi just came across the line quite slowly for some reason. Charles Leclerc has actually just gone up to P6 in the Ferrari on the hard compound tyre. Which is a good time compared to Alonso, obviously, and also the Alfa Romeos, who are on a tyre that is 2 steps softer. But, yeah, Leclerc is 6th, and then you got Alonso 7th, Raikkonen 8th, and then Carlos Sainz in P9. Lando Norris is in P10. And then Daniel Ricciardo is in P11. We're just seeing a replay of Charles Leclerc at turn 1, locking the inside front. Not running wide. He actually, his exit of turn 1 was exactly what you would want it to be. But obviously that tyre probably a bit cold going into the corner as Alonso is on another lap. But yeah, Ricciardo P11. And you got Tsunoda in 12th. And then Tsunoda is now up to 7th place in the Alpha Tauri. So there you go, Tsunoda up to P7. Slightly slower than Charles Leclerc by about 0.013 of a second, I believe, there. So you've got Nicholas Latifi in 13th. And then Pierre Gasly in 14th. 15th is Mick Schumacher. Sebastian Vettel is 16th. 17th is Ocon. 18th is Russell. And then 19th Mazepin and 20th Lance Stroll. Fernando Alonso comes to the line but does not go any quicker. In fact, he is half a second slower than he was on the previous lap. So Lewis Hamilton, as we're about 23 minutes in to this session, Lewis Hamilton quickest by 7, almost 8 tenths of a second compared to Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez, who are both 2nd and 3rd for Red Bull. Again, though, the Red Bulls have not run on the softer tyre that Mercedes have done so far, and Red Bull did their laps, I think, earlier than Hamilton, so Hamilton would have had the advantage of a grippier circuit than what Red Bull had. And then Bottas is 4th, Giovinazzi is 5th, and then you got Leclerc, Tsunoda, Alonso, Raikkonen, Carlos Sainz rounding out the rest of the top 10. Talking of Carlos Sainz, he's on the hard compound tyre, and he's on another flying lap here. He's improved his first sector, so we'll see what he does for the second sector as Pierre Gasly shoots up to 11th place in the AlphaTauri, and Sainz a slower middle sector, but he's going to be close in terms of improving his lap. He might just be a tenth or so slower in this final sector. We'll see. As Valtteri Bottas, by the way, in 4th place, almost a second slower than teammate Hamilton. Valtteri has just done a purple first sector in the Mercedes. As Carlos Sainz now into the final corner, and Bottas has another purple middle sector. And Carlos Sainz does do a very, very good final sector, and on the hard compound tyre, goes all the way up to 5th place. A good run there for the Spaniard, who has had a pretty good season. As Valtteri Bottas now through to the final couple corners. And to the line. And Valtteri Bottas does go quicker than Lewis Hamilton. So Valtteri Bottas into P1 by 0.03 of a second. People need to remember that not only is Lewis Hamilton good around this circuit, but also Valtteri Bottas pretty good around the Yas Marina circuit. He won here in 2017, beating Hamilton fair and square. Was on the front row here, I think, in 2018, or he was, if he wasn't on the front row, he was very quick in 3rd place. 2019, he started from the back and he finished almost on the podium, I think, for Mercedes. I think finished in 4th place, and again, very close to a podium, despite starting from the very back of the field. So very impressive performance there. And last year, at least compared to Lewis Hamilton, he was pretty competitive as well, despite not winning the Grand Prix. As Perez, by the way, has gone up to third place. Don't know what tyre he was on. I would assume it was the medium, and I think it was the medium compound because he only gained about a tenth and a half on Max in that particular lap. So there you go. Let me just read the chat quickly. So Dylan Forrestal says, if the FIA could arrange the prize money to include maybe 12 or 15 teams, we would have more teams that could have more drivers, but the teams getting the teams to agree with that would be challenging. Yes, it would. Saying that, there is some decent news that because of the power unit regulations that it looks as though we're going to have from 2026 on, where we're going to have power units that are a lot more electrified, it looks as though we could have maybe the introduction of Audi to Formula One. I still don't think it'll happen because I don't think Audi want to actually, compete in Formula One. I just don't think they do. I think if they wanted to compete in Formula One, I think they already would have, to be honest. And I don't think, at the moment, they think they can compete with, say, Mercedes. Of course, they're what would be their big rival in Germany. It would be obviously a very big rivalry there if they were especially close on the grid. Say if Audi did come on to the Formula One grid. As by the way, Lando Norris has gone up to 6th place, but like I said, ultimately I don't think Audi will come to Formula One because I think they would have done it already, and I think they don't want to spend the money necessary to compete in Formula One. I think what they've got at the minute is what they're happy with. As Hamilton does a new purple first sector. Of course, he's on the soft compound tyre. Yuki Tsunoda has done a personal best first and second sector on the hard compound tyre as Tsunoda improves P5. Good run there for Tsunoda, who has looked pretty good this weekend, as Hamilton way quicker than Valtteri Bottas so far on this lap. After the first two sectors, he is almost 6.5 tenths of a second quicker than Valtteri Bottas. That Mercedes is working for Lewis Hamilton very well. Saying that, collects a bit of oversteer through what was turn 12, I think. Now into turn 15 and 16, the final two corners. And Lewis Hamilton comes to the line and goes P1 by 7.5 tenths of a second. An absolutely blistering lap from Lewis Hamilton, a 1:23.2. What a lap that was from Lewis. I'll just update some other positions in the order quickly, such as Esteban Ocon up to 13th, Mick Schumacher up to 15th, and the rest of the order, I think, is as it was. But we are, as we're seeing now, replays, I think a couple of replays of Lewis Hamilton's lap where he probably could have gone another tenth of a second quicker, which is quite a scary prospect there. Just want to say, now that we're halfway through practice 3, of course, the final practice session of the weekend, final practice session of the season, just want to say to anyone who is watching and is new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because I will be live later on today at 12:30 p.m. UK time, which is in 2 hours from now, for the qualifying watch-along. So don't forget to come along to that for the very, very important qualifying session in Abu Dhabi. And of course, I'll be live 3 times tomorrow for the Grand Prix. Firstly at 10 a.m. UK time, that's 3 hours before the race starts, for the race preview. And then I'll be live with Nib at 12:30 p.m. UK time for the race watch along the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. And then I'll be live as soon as possible after the race finishes with the race reaction. The race reaction probably will be live about half an hour after the race finishes in Abu Dhabi. So don't forget, if you are new to the channel, to subscribe and hit the notification bell for that content coming up. As well, smash the like button and share this video and channel everywhere you can. Of course, helps the channel grow a lot. Good morning, by the way, to Samuel Clifton. Great to see you in the chat. Carol Baskin, interesting name, says McLaren have dropped off. Hope they are looking to next year. I think, to be honest, pretty much all of the teams have followed a similar program in terms of next year's development. McLaren have not really developed their car since, say, the middle of the summer. They've not really done anything to it. The reason Ferrari have moved ahead is because, one, I think the tracks we've, raced at towards the end of this season have suited them better than McLaren, but also Ferrari brought a new power unit, which is in view to next season, and that has helped Ferrari be clearly better than McLaren in the final half of the season. So, yeah, McLaren, I think, have been for quite a while concentrating on 2022, and we'll see what they do in 2022. If they keep making the improvements that, they have been, I wouldn't be surprised at all if McLaren next season were a title contender. Because if you look at, as Kimi Räikkönen, by the way, shoots up to P6 in the Alfa Romeo looking pretty good so far. As I think I've got a couple positions incorrect at the moment, so let me just update that. So you got Tsunoda in P5, Räikkönen in P6, and then Norris in 7th, and then Gasly in 7th, sorry. And then in 8th is Carlos Sainz, then Norris, then Giovinazzi, and then Leclerc, Alonso, Ocon, and then the rest of the order is pretty much as it was, except that Sebastian Vettel now to 15th. In the Aston Martin is a replay of Hamilton getting out of his car. Don't know why they're showing that, other than just him just having a word with, I think, Bono, of course, his long-time engineer. But, yeah, with McLaren, like I said, I would not be surprised next season if they were title contenders. Wouldn't be surprised at all, because since 2019, they've probably been the most improved team, I think, since 2019. And they've got better every season. Of course, this season won a Grand Prix. They've had also another, 3 other podiums, I think, this season. Other than that race win, that 1-2 at Monza. And at Monza, I don't think they were the quickest team, but I think they were definitely, the reason they won that Grand Prix was not just Hamilton and Verstappen took each other out. It wasn't just because of that. Daniel Ricciardo was leading that Grand Prix fair and square, and Max, I don't think, had the pace to beat Ricciardo and McLaren in that Grand Prix. So, I think McLaren were very, very good there. And like I said, kind of a fair and square victory, I think. And yeah, I think McLaren, if they just take that next step, which they have been taking in the last 2 or 3 years, then I wouldn't be surprised one bit if McLaren were title contenders. They have the driver lineup, without doubt. Norris, very, very good. Ricciardo, of course, experienced and a multi-race winner in Formula 1. And Ricciardo, he's been in Formula 1 now 10 years. So, like I said, he is very experienced. Also, they've got a good design team led by, I think, probably the third, probably best designer in Formula 1, James Key, who we know has done designed some great cars over the last decade or so. So, they've got a good design team. They've got a good, I guess you could call him team principal / sporting director in Andreas Seidel, who's been there and done that in motorsport and has so far proven to be, a success in Formula 1. And the team, I think, has a much stronger and better leadership than it had during the unsuccessful and horrific McLaren Honda days from 2015, 2016, 2017. So if McLaren just make that next step, I think McLaren definitely are title contenders next season. Do you reckon Haas, asks Dylan Forrestal, do you reckon Haas will jump to the front of the midfield next season? Of course, Haas F1 have not developed this car at all. It's basically the 2020 car, or even the 2019 car, with a updated power unit. I think they'll probably be better next season, but I don't think it'll be a case of what you saw back in 2009, where, of course, in 2008, Honda were far at the back of the grid, but they were focusing massively on 2009, became Brawn, and then, of course, in 2009, they were the champions. I don't think you'll see anything similar to that from Haas F1 next season. I think they'll probably be a midfield team next season, but I don't think they'll be that strong, because I think luckily, because of the way, the new regulations have been delayed to 2022, and most of the teams this season, except probably for Mercedes and Red Bull, most of the teams this season have only developed their car up until, say, May or June of this year. So they've had plenty of time for the rest of the year to focus on developing, the car for next year. So I don't think that effect will be as big as maybe people are expecting or people are hoping. As 23 minutes to go, and yes, still Mercedes 1-2. By the way, Lewis 1.5 seconds quicker than Max Verstappen, who is in P4. A reminder though, Max did his lap at the very start of the session on him at set of medium, so Max can definitely go much quicker than what he's done so far. So we're yet to see what he can do in the Red Bull. And just making sure the order is correct. And it is, as we're currently looking at a Mercedes, I think possibly on a warm-up lap for a quick lap. Nib says in the chat, I would love for it to be McLaren for Danny, but I think it'll be Ferrari. Honestly, with Ferrari, I don't think it will be, because I still don't trust. I mean, they might be title contenders early on, but I don't think for the entire season, because I don't trust that team with anything really, and I definitely don't trust that team principles. By the way, Lewis Hamilton ran wide at turn 1 on this flying lap. I think he's going to continue with this lap. Goes a bit out of sorts there in the middle of the turn 5 hairpin, collected a bit of oversteer, I think, in his car, and he's now backed off, so he will go for another run in a moment. It's Max Verstappen is in his car, and I think we'll be coming out on track soon. But yeah, I think with Ferrari, they should be better next season, and they should be closer to Mercedes and Red Bull, given that Ferrari have put a lot of focus onto 2022. But I don't trust them at all, because we've seen over the last few years Ferrari really squander, I think, quite good opportunities to have success. We've seen them do that plenty of times, and I just don't trust this team. Nothing really is different about Ferrari compared to 2019. That was the last time they were, competing at that part of the grid, as Sky F1 now go to an ad break. Latifi, though, did go up to P7, I just saw, in the Williams. But, yeah, the team from 2019 is not really different, except for, there's no Sebastian Vettel, it's now Carlos Sainz. The team personnel is basically the same. And I wouldn't trust them with, winning a championship. And I still, even if next year they have a good car, I still do not think that they will ever win a championship with Matteo Binotto as team principal. I just don't think it will happen. The only way it will happen if he's team boss is if they are, clearly, dominantly out front. That's the only way it'll happen. If they're in a close fight with, say, Mercedes and Red Bull, they'll do what they always do, and they'll bottle it. Nib is giving his best defense of Ferrari in chat, saying they have the drivers, they have the engine. Yeah, I'd say they have the engine. Not the best engine, but they have the engine. They have the best driver lineup, but, you know, would they come to blows in a championship fight? Who knows? I still think the best way to run a team is what you've seen from Red Bull and Mercedes this season, a clear number 1 and a clear number 2. So that might come a cropper. And they rebounded very strongly from last year. I'd fucking hope so. They couldn't have got any worse from last year, so I don't think that's really an achievement, to be honest. But yeah, like I said, they've concentrated on next year a lot, Ferrari. And yeah, they've got, like I said, without doubt, they've got the best driver lineup. They do have a much better power unit now. But I still don't think that team can get the results needed, because I just don't think operationally they're still as good as a McLaren, as a Red Bull, as a Mercedes, to be right up there. And like I said, if they're going to win the championship next season, they're going to have to be like half a second quicker than the rest of the field. Because if they're, like we saw in 2019, if they're closely competing with other teams for victory and podiums, then they'll do what they usually do and trip over themselves. Super Kev says Leclerc has disappointed me this year. I expected him to blow Sainz out of the water. That shows that Sainz is underrated. And yeah, Andrew Williamson confirming what I said. Anything was an improvement on last year. Like I said, there was no way they could get any worse than last season unless they literally just not developed anything about the car in 2021. With Leclerc and Sainz, Charles Leclerc has disappointed me slightly this season, but I have always rated Carlos Sainz highly. So I'm not going to be, I'm not massively disappointed with what he has produced this season. Because, like I said, I've always believed that Carlos Sainz is a driver absolutely good enough to be at, the top or higher echelons of the grid on a consistent basis, which he did show for McLaren in 2020, where he got, so many top 5 finishes. Really, you could argue, should have won that Grand Prix at Monza in 2020 for McLaren, because he was very, very quick in the McLaren. By the way, we've just come back from the ad break, and Carlos Sainz is up to 3rd place. I think he's done a run on the soft compound tyre there. He's done a run on the medium, but then again, the Red Bulls have not really pushed that hard in this session. Max Verstappen, though, is now finally on the soft compound tyre, and he is going to go for a lap. We'll see what Max does on this particular attempt. Yeah, with Leclerc and Sainz, I am a bit disappointed with Leclerc, but not massively. And next season, I think it's definitely up for grabs, that number 1 driver role at Ferrari, because Carlos has definitely proven this season that he can give Leclerc a run for his money. The only thing Carlos needs to do is make sure he improves his consistency in qualifying, because this season in qualifying, he's been all over the place. As Max now into the turn 6 and 7 chicane, but he locks the inside front and backs off on this lap. So Max will go for another one pretty soon, I think, as we've got 15 minutes to go in this 15 minutes to go in this session. Dylan says if Alonso was still at Ferrari last year, he would have found a way to get a win out of it. I don't think Fernando's that good. Nibs says, I think we forget Leclerc has 2 poles. True, but if you look overall at the season, I think Leclerc has not been as dominant as expected compared to Carlos Sainz. And yeah, there's definitely been races this season where Charles has been very, very strong. I remember at the start of the season, he was fourth on the grid in Bahrain and Imola. Again, he was very, very strong. Like Nib said, 2 pole positions. He was fourth on the grid, I think, for the race at Silverstone. Of course, he almost and probably should have won that race. But Carlos has had his, plenty of his races as well where he has been just as good, if not better. As just trying to do the order at the moment and get it correct. So Raikkonen is 8th, Giovinazzi 9th. Russell is now up into P10. And then you got Latifi in P11. Mick Schumacher, as Max Verstappen, I think, possibly went to start another lap, but then backed out yet again. Don't know why. But yeah, you got Mick Schumacher up now in P12. Andrew Williamson says, it seems the new layout suits Lewis. I just want a clean race and the best guy deserves it. I mean, yeah, that's ideally what I want in this Grand Prix this weekend. I don't want it to be decided by an accident, because it would leave a sour taste, I think, F1's mouth, and it's all we'd hear about and be talking about through the winter, and that's not, as Lewis Hamilton there. Another moment with Nikita Mazepin in a practice 3 session, but I don't think that's as bad as what happened last weekend. As Sergio Perez, by the way, is back up to 4th place. But yeah, hopefully it's not decided by any shenanigans on circuit. And I'll just, as Lewis Hamilton has just done a purple first sector, I'll just update the order quickly. So, Alonso 13th, Ocon 40th, then Norris, Leclerc, Ricciardo, Vettel, Mazepin, Stroll is the bottom 7 or so there. Hamilton has done a yellow middle sector, meaning he has not improved on his middle sector so far, with 12 minutes left in practice 3, and he runs wide at the exit of turn 12. And to be honest, maybe it's because of the track conditions, but it doesn't, to me, look as though he can go any quicker on that. As Verstappen got a bit of a sticker there on the right rear tyre. Yeah, it doesn't look to me as though Lewis can really go any quicker, because he's done a couple laps now where he's made a couple mistakes. As Charles Leclerc goes all the way up to 6th place, probably on a set of medium tyres. Of course, the teams are trying to save tyres for the qualifying section later on, where they'll be using the soft probably. As Max Verstappen continues on this lap, not the best lap in the world for him. Like I said, his first sector is not an improvement. His middle sector is, but he's about 0.4 of a second down so far on this lap compared to Lewis Hamilton, as he now rounds the final 2 corners, turn 15 and then turn number 16. And Max Verstappen should go second. And he does, and does a purple final sector, which is not a surprise, because that's where the Red Bull is probably the best car on the grid in that final sector. And he's only 0.2 of a second off. That's pretty good for Max, because he's already done 4 laps on that compound. And it's a C5, by the way, compound there for Max. And like I said, the first sector he did not improve that first sector compared to his personal best. So Max can definitely go quicker on that lap. Probably not that much quicker, but it'll be quick enough and close enough to be keeping Hamilton honest for sure in qualifying later today. And of course, with us having the softest compounds for this weekend's Grand Prix, that's just a replay of Hamilton's big lockup. I think, was it a double lockup at turn 12? No, just the inside front at turn 12. yeah, with us having the 3 softest compounds, that will make, of course, tyre wear a very important factor in the Grand Prix tomorrow. And we've seen that Red Bull, I think lately, are better when it comes to looking after their tyres and having better tyre grip than Mercedes do. So will be interesting to see what happens with that tomorrow. As Lando Norris, who is down the order, is on a lap on the soft compound tyre. He's going to probably shoot up to 6th or 7th place with this lap. Let's see as he rounds the final couple corners. As his teammate Daniel Ricciardo has gone up to P7 in the other McLaren. Lando Norris goes all the way up into 4th place. So good pace there from McLaren. Like I said, on a Friday, they don't tend to show their real pace. On a Saturday morning, you tend to see a lot more of what McLaren actually have. And what we've seen is pretty good, I think, so far in this session. The Norris up to 4th, and then Tsunoda 5th, Perez 6th, Sainz in 7th, and then Daniel Ricciardo is in 8th place, Leclerc 9th, Gasly 10th, and then Raikkonen 11th, Giovinazzi 12th, Vettel is 13th, Russell is 14th, and then Latifi 15th, Schumacher 16th, and then Alonso, Ocon, Mazepin, Stroll round out the rest of the order as we have 8 minutes to go in practice 3. As Sergio Perez now on a personal best lap. First 2 sectors, much quicker than he went previously. And he's obviously now on the soft compound tyre. And now into the heart of the final sector. Now coming through the penultimate corner. Now into the final corner, passing a slow Aston Martin on the inside. And Perez comes to the line and stays in 6th place, which is a bit of a surprise. He wasn't really as quick on that tyre compared to what he did earlier on the mediums as I thought he would be, as Lance Stroll goes from last place up to 10th place in the Aston Martin. Aston Martin, of course, had a bit of a disastrous Grand Prix last weekend. Really poor qualifying. The race was going well, but then other drivers decided to ruin that, such as Yuki Tsunoda. As Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri is up to 6th place. AlphaTauri have ended the season very, very well. But because of the race results that Alpine have gotten, doesn't look as though they're going to get the reward for it, which of course would be 5th place in the Constructors, but it doesn't look as though they are going to get that. As Fernando Alonso is now up to 14th place. And then you've got Ocon has just moved up a position to 18th. The Alpines, though, both on the medium compound tyre. As Max Verstappen is now on another set of soft compound tyres. Does a personal best first sector, so here we go. As he's only just over 1/10 of a second down on Lewis Hamilton through the first sector. And now he comes down the straight towards turn number 6, getting it slowed down and make sure you don't lock up, very important. At turn 6, he exits the chicane quite well. And now with the DRS open again, flies into, as he's about 1/4 of a second off Hamilton through the first 2 sectors, but he makes a slight error and backs off on this lap. If he continued on that lap and did not make that mistake, he probably would have put the gap down to about 1/10 of a second or so. So the pace is there from Max, just needs to get the lap nailed. As 5 minutes to go in practice 3. As Lewis Hamilton on circuit on a set of soft compound tyres. Lewis saying on the team radio, should have gone back to the other tyre. Got a flat spot on this one. I thought you knew. I don't think I can drive on this tyre. You can actually see the flat spots on the right front, I believe. And yeah, it's the tyre he flat spotted, I think, a few laps ago there for Hamilton. So I am a bit surprised that they've not pitted him, because it's not going to go any quicker, probably on that tyre. And as well, the softer the tyre, the more sensitive it will be to lock-ups and, going offline and stuff like that. And there's a replay of Verstappen at turn 9, and turned in, but the rear end just not complying and not giving him the grip that he needed to stay tighter to the apex of turn 9. I have to say, though, the circuit does look more fun to drive than the old layout. It's faster and more sweeping, and I think it will allow for the cars to follow better, because the cars will be able to, I think, follow closer in the slipstream through what is now a faster circuit, and then they'll be able to, stay closer, and then obviously with the DRS, they'll be able to get closer and possibly overtake around this circuit. Anything, I think, this weekend would be better than what we had at the Grand Prix last season. Last season's Grand Prix here was the worst race of all time. There is no contenders for that. And yeah, this circuit layout definitely much better. And they had to go for this new layout because the previous layout was it just wasn't good enough. As Esteban Ocon goes up to 12th place ahead of his teammate, of course, Fernando Alonso. Ocon up to P12. As we're looking at a Mercedes right now of, I think, Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, it is Lewis Hamilton, because the other Mercedes of Valtteri Bottas is in the pit lane. Hamilton not really pushing on this lap. Maybe he's been filled up with some fuel. I don't know. But he's not. It doesn't, to me, look like he's pushing as hard as he was on a single lap attempt as he comes around the final corner. And this, I don't think this will be an improvement for Hamilton. And no, it is not, I don't believe. But he continues on doing some more laps as we enter the final 2 minutes of practice here in Abu Dhabi. Sergio Perez goes up to 4th place on a 124.0, which is at least where Perez needs to be in qualifying, of course, later today. As Max Verstappen is coming out on circuit. I don't think Verstappen, though, no, he won't. Verstappen won't be able to get around in time to start a final lap because he hasn't got enough time to get round and, get over the line before the checkered flag comes out, as Hamilton is just doing a bit of a, I don't know, maybe a slight race simulation on this tyre to see what it feels like in a race situation. But Hamilton looking good, there's no doubt about it, but I still feel as though Max Verstappen has more in the bag in that car, and I still think it will be very close, without doubt, in this qualifying session coming up in 2 hours' time. Again, don't forget to join me in an hour and a half for the build-up of that session, as here's a replay of Gasly. And, something from the roof of the pit gear dropped down, almost hit Gasly's car. Thankfully didn't, and he said, "What the fuck was that?" To be honest, I don't know what it's called. I think it's something to do with the pit gear. As Gasly struggling then on circuit on a very cold set of hard compound tyres, as the track temperature, of course, gets colder and colder now that the warmest part of the day at the Yas Marina circuit has, of course, passed as the session now comes to a close. We'll see if anyone improves their final lap time. Hamilton and Verstappen should finish up in first and second place. And then Bottas and Perez, both about 3/4 of a second off the pace of Lewis Hamilton. They're not really in a competitive state going into qualifying in terms of the fight for pole position. As, checkered flag coming out for most people. It looks as though pretty much everyone is going to finish in the positions that they are in. So guys, practice 3 over and done with. I'll just read out your final finishing order. Lewis Hamilton P1 here in practice 3. Max Verstappen 2nd and Bottas 3rd. Perez 4th. Norris 5th. Tsunoda in P6. And then Gasly, Sainz, Ricciardo and Leclerc completing the rest of the top 10. And then the rest of the order: Stroll 11th, Ocon 12th, Raikkonen 13th, Giovinazzi 14th, Alonso 15th, Vettel 16th, Russell 17th, Latifi 18th, Schumacher 19th, and Mazepin 20th. Like I said, guys, make sure to join me in an hour and a half's time at 12:30 p.m. UK time for the qualifying watch along, the final qualifying session, and of course, a very, very important qualifying session in determining the destiny of the Drivers' World Championship for 2021. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications bell for that content coming up. You can subscribe the bottom right of the screen. That's probably the easiest place to do it if you want to do that. As well, smash the like button, share this video and channel everywhere you can, and don't forget as well to join my Discord server, link below in the description. That is the best place for notifications for my videos and live streams. But guys, until qualifying in an hour and a half from now, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.